If you're looking for the latest need-to-know updates on the world of movies, music, and TV, you've come to the right place. Ahead on this episode, we have the latest Hollywood headlines from Tina Maric, a debate of Netflix versus network with Becca Malburg, an album review with Brandon Kratkoczki, and tons more.
So grab yourself some popcorn because from the Ball State University, The Real Deal starts now.
Hello and welcome to The Real Deal, Ball State's one and only entertainment news show. I'm Connor Fack.
And I'm Ramel Tadai. The news out of Hollywood this week has a slightly small theme running through it, at least in terms of women, creatures, and computer bits.
But in each case, that's what makes the news so big. So here with Hollywood headlines is Tina Maric.
Thanks, guys. There were quite a few exciting announcements and sneak peeks this week. First up, former Sony Pictures chief Amy Pascal has joined Denise Di and Robin Zwickard to produce the studio's Little Women remake. Variety reports Sony has also hired Sarah Polley to adapt the script from Louisa May Alcott's classic coming-of-age novel that follows four sisters in the post-Civil War era. Di and Zwickard have been involved with the project since 2013, while Pascal was co-chair of Sony Pictures Entertainment and chair of its motion picture group. The 1994 version of Little Women starring Winona Ryder that Di produced and Zwickard wrote the screenplay for was nominated for 3 Academy Awards. Next, Joseph Gordon-Levitt will produce and star in the live-action Fraggle Rock movie. In the works for nearly a decade, Variety reports it is the big-screen adaptation of the 1980s musical puppet series created by the late Jim Henson. The first screen personas I ever loved were Henson creations, first on Sesame Street and then on Fraggle Rock, Gordon-Levitt said. Jim Henson's characters make you laugh and sing, but they're also layered, surprising, and wise. From Oscar the Grouch to Yoda to the Fraggles, I've never stopped loving his work, even as a young frisky man and on into adulthood. Collaborating with Lisa Henson makes me confident we can do something that Jim would have loved. I'm grateful and excited to be working with New Regency on this project. Another project Gordon-Levitt is a part of is Oliver Stone's upcoming thriller Snowden. He will play the part of Edward Snowden in the film, which will be released in the U.S. on Christmas. And lastly, the trailer for Adam Sandler's movie Pixels has garnered 34.3 million views worldwide in its first 24 hours online. According to Variety, the announcement from Sony Pictures Entertainment marks a record for one of its movies, 50% above the previous mark of 22 million streams for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. In Pixels, Sandler plays a former champion arcade gamer presented with the task of saving Earth from an alien invasion. The twist in this movie is that the aliens are giant versions of classic video game characters, including Pac-Man and Donkey Kong. Also starring in the film are Kevin James as the President of the United States, along with Josh Gad, Peter Dinklage, and Michelle Monaghan. Pixels was directed by Chris Columbus from a script by Tim Dowling and Tim Airley, based on the short film by Patrick Jean. That's the big news in Hollywood this week. Connor and Romel, back to you.
Thanks, Tina. Sounds like the studios have got some impressive projects in the work.
But the big studios aren't the only ones churning out content these days, whether it comes to movies or TV shows. Here with some insight into what streaming services now mean for content production is Becca Malburg with Netflix versus Network. Take it away, Becca.
Thanks, guys. Well, technology is ever-changing in our society, and with it are the ways we watch television. With streaming services such as Netflix, Hulu, and Amazon Prime all significantly cheaper than a cable bill, more young adults are turning to streaming services over TV subscriptions. With the shift in viewing mediums has come a shift in cable content. Now more than ever, networks are leaning on reality broadcasting, sports broadcasting, and awards programming. Basically anything that's worth watching live. But that has also benefited the TV networks. I mean, reality shows are significantly cheaper to produce than scripted programming, so the shift in content does have its pros. And streaming sites have their pros too, and their cons. For those creating the content, there are huge pros. With streaming services, you have the ability to know exactly what people are watching, which means you can design content specific to the likes of your audience. Now, there's no longer the guesswork of trying to judge viewership based on a few Nielsen families. The viewership numbers are easily read, and this means that we, as streaming service users, have the ability to decide which shows get picked up for another season and which do not. It's a power trip, and I've been using it to my full advantage. However, streaming services do have their cons as well. On streaming services, a show's season is typically released all at once, meaning that people expect the next season to be back even sooner, even though it takes just as long to film that season. Now, impatience is worn down for a season 2, but I guess that's a small price to pay. I mean, literally, since the streaming packages are generally affordable. So, do we think that this will harm the network television of today? I don't know if it'll harm it per se, but it'll for sure change the content of what's on television. The way we get our entertainment is ever changing, and providers are doing their best to keep up with those changes, and my hat is off to them. Now, for a more in-depth look at the discussion of Netflix versus network, check out episode 14 of the Real Deal podcast at realdealbsu.com.
Thanks, Becca. In fact, now would be a great time to check out all our great online content since we're about to take our first break.
But don't stay away long, since up next we have reviews of both the latest season of Community with Logan Sowash and Kendrick Lamar's new album with Brandon Kratkoczki, plus a whole lot more. See you soon. You can't always be strong, still not bowing down. This heavy crown.
Son of a bitch!
I can see the company's perspective. You're the last real threat on the table.
And we got nothing left to talk about. Me and the devil.
I have to see her again.
Are you looking for this?
To rescue what little civilization we have left.
No pressure. I'm not gonna let you do it.
The Divergent series.
Glad you stuck with us. We said we'd be back.
And so too did the makers of the hit sitcom Community, even after the series was canceled by original producer NBC.
Here with his take on the debut of the show's Yahoo-produced 6th season is Logan Sowash. Logan?
Thanks, guys. After almost 6 years of being on the air, I don't think there has been a show that has ridden the line like the former NBC comedy series Community has. Whether it involves low ratings or possible cancellation, Community seemed like the show that was too good for its time slot, ultimately forcing fans of the series to fight for its survival. I even remember a phrase that started out as a reference from Season 2 and turned into a cry of support for the continuation of the series. The trend was the hashtag 6 seasons and a movie, and I'm happy to say that in 2015, all we need now is the movie. Despite NBC dropping the show last year, Yahoo picked it up for their new streaming service called Yahoo Screen, giving Community its well-deserved return last week. Here are my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Season 6, titled Ladders and Lawnmower Maintenance and Postnatal Care. The first question that needs to be asked about Season 6 is what's changed? In between last season and this season, 3 of the show's actors have moved on to other projects. John Oliver has moved on to a much bigger gig for HBO on Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and Jonathan Banks has returned to Albuquerque as Mike Ehrmantraut for AMC's Better Call Saul. However, the saddest departure, though, is that of Yvette Nicole Brown's Lovable Shirley, marking the 3rd of the original cast to leave the show. Season 6 answer to these departures are 2 new additions to the cast, Francesca Frankie Dart and Elroy Patashnik, portrayed wonderfully by Paget Brewster and Keith David. While Elroy was only introduced in the latter half of episode 2, Frankie's presence in the 2 episodes was enjoyable, giving a much needed change to the study group while also creating foundations of friendship and drama among the characters. Even though this season has just started, I can't wait to see how they apply both of these characters in the future. Despite those changes, what makes these 2 episodes great is that the best parts of the show are still intact. Both episodes have the same wit and delivery and character that made the past seasons go so great. Episode 1, however, does feel the most unique of the bunch, using the majority of its runtime to poke fun at the concept of change, possibly making fun of those who overreacted and thought the show wasn't going to be the same transferring to Yahoo. Episode 2 even has a heartfelt revelation involving an adult's view of parenting, though that revelation is shared time with a plotline involving virtual reality and how silly the film Lawnmower Man was, in the classic Harmon fashion. In the end, the first 2 episodes of Season 6 were wonderful. They made me laugh throughout and even caught me off guard with some of their choices. The episodes have made the wait for next Tuesday even more difficult, and you better believe that I cannot wait for a future paintball episode this season. If you're caught up with this series, following Season 6 is a must. That's all the time I have for today. I'm Logan Sowash, and go Greendale human beings. Back to you, Ramel and Connor.
Thanks for that measured review, Logan. It's good to see that the show hasn't changed too much.
That said, we here are going to change things up once again since it's already time for our next break. But don't dismay, we still have Chauncey Baker highlighting a Richard Linklater film that's been flying under the radar, Brandon Kratkoczki with a review of the album To Pimp a Butterfly, and more.
We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking around. Now, fame is hard to achieve and even harder to spread evenly, which means that sometimes even a well-known director's work can go pretty unnoticed.
Up next, we have Chauncey Baker with one such film by Richard Linklater in this week's Under the Radar. What's the scoop, Chauncey?
Richard Linklater is a pretty prolific dude. He directed Dazed and Confused and School of Rock, and was most recently nominated for an Academy Award for his coming-of-age epic, Boyhood. What you probably didn't realize about Linklater is that he has made a multitude of indie films that are just as good, if not sometimes better than those. His first film, Slacker, was a low-budget portrait of the people living in and around Austin, Texas, and has basically zero traditional plot, and served as the inspiration for Kevin Smith's Clerks. I'm not here to talk about Slacker. I'm going to tell you all about his 2006 animated sci-fi film called A Scanner Darkly. First and foremost, go to the video store right now and rent this film immediately. Right now. Pause this video if you're watching it on the internet, or DVR the show if you're watching it on TV. The film stars Keanu Reeves as Agent Fred, an undercover DEA agent sent in to take down the makers of an extremely popular yet addictive street drug called Substance D. His cover identity is Bob Arctor, a low-level dealer, and as an undercover agent he is sometimes forced to partake in the drug. A major plot point of the film is that the drug essentially makes the left and right hemispheres of the brain compete against one another, leading to hallucinations, psychosis, and dissociative identity disorder, leaving its users unaware of who they actually are. Agent Fred, who wears a special suit that masks his identity while he's working at the police station, is then assigned to go after Bob Arctor. He becomes unaware that he, in fact, is Arctor. The plot thickens. Keanu Reeves, while often lampooned for his acting ability, does a fine job with the character, but who really shines in this film is the supporting cast. Robert Downey Jr. plays Barris, Arctor's paranoid friend that constantly goes on about various conspiracy theories, most of them true in this particular environment. This was made right before Iron Man was released, and he is excellent. Woody Harrelson is Ernie Luckman, the chill roommate who just wants to get high, and I swear that wig he's wearing is straight out of the Hunger Games. Winona Ryder plays Donna, Arctor's girlfriend. What's most impressive performance of this film comes from Rory Cochrane, who plays Charles Freck, the most burnout of the group. The first 5 minutes of this film is worth watching for him alone. I won't ruin the sequence for you, but like I said earlier, go out and rent it immediately. The film is rotoscoped, which means that the film was filmed in live action first, but the frames were individually traced over to give the film a unique cel-shaded look. Another thing worth mentioning is that it's based on a Philip K. Dick novel, the guy whose literature has inspired films like Blade Runner, Total Recall, and Minority Report. Out of all of the adaptations of his work, Scanner is easily the most faithful to its source material. It also happens to be one of my favorite books of all time, so that's rare for me to say that about a book to film. The film speaks of an overreaching government, the failure of the war on drugs, and surveillance on a prophetic level. All of the phones and security cameras of this world are being monitored by the government. The film came out in 2006 during the Bush administration, exactly 5 years before the NSA's PRISM surveillance program became public knowledge. I'm not sure whether or not to give Philip K. Dick or Richard Linklater credit for this, but this film is amazing and worth a look. I'm Chauncey Baker, and this has been Under the Radar.
Thanks, Chauncey. It sounds like Scanner is pretty compelling in visuals and storytelling and is definitely worth a watch.
Up next, we have a review of an album definitely worth a listen, compelling orally and lyrically. Here's Brandon Kratkoczki with his review. Brandon?
Ever since the early part of this decade, Kendrick Lamar has slowly but surely become one of the most important and unique voices in hip-hop. This was, of course, achieved through a couple of incredibly solid releases, 2011's Section 80 and 2012's Good Kid, Mad City, the latter of which is considered by many as one of the finest hip-hop releases of the past few years. However, Lamar has managed to top himself with his latest release, To Pimp a Butterfly, an assured, dense, incredible record that may just be the best hip-hop record of the decade so far. One of the more immediately amazing aspects of the album is the production. The beats presented on the album are deeply rooted in jazz, funk, and soul music, and with such amazing producers as Flying Lotus and Pharrell Williams behind it, the album, to be brief, grooves. King Kunta rides on a strong foot-stomping instrumental, Wesley's Theory's warped bass, courtesy of the always amazing Thundercat, creates a sonically thrilling atmosphere, and the reworked version of the lead single I feels like it was recorded live at the most happening concert ever witnessed. The tracks bleed into one another flawlessly, feeling like one piece of art, as opposed to just a collection of tracks. Much of this helps the album flow completely smoothly. Now, the album may be 80 minutes long, but listening to it does not feel like the least bit of a chore. Of course, you could have the best beats in the world, but without dynamic and interesting rapping, it's all for nothing. Fortunately, Kendrick pulls in some of the best performances of his entire career. The interlude for Free gives the feeling of a man manically scatting for his life. The Blacker the Berry is the angriest performance we've ever seen from him, cutting deep to the core of the confusion and anger Kendrick feels about race relations in America. However, the highlight of Kendrick's rapping on this LP is You, which can be read as the self-deprecating companion piece to I. In this song's second verse, Kendrick uses a wavering, near voice-cracking tone to portray a character of a man confronting the person who led him to drink as heavily as he had been. The overwhelming emotional content of the verse, combined with the wavering vocals and bottle sound effects, makes for one of the best verses of the 21st century, bar none. On top of his delivery, Kendrick's lyrics are on a higher level than any other rapper out there, rhapsodizing about consumerist culture, relationships, and what it means to be an African-American man in these tense, socially divisive times. Now, perfect scores are rare for me to give out. I believe that they should be saved for truly exceptional pieces of art. But the amazing production, the superb lyricism, and the stellar performance that Kendrick Lamar guarantees that this album will have a spot in history. I give Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly 5 stars out of 5. This is the type of album that is used to define eras in music as benchmarks, in the vein of Sgt. Pepper or Purple Rain or Kid A. This album is essential listening for anyone who loves music. That's it for my review of To Pimp a Butterfly. I'm Brandon Kratkoczki.
Thanks, Brandon. It's not often these days that we give great music all the credit it truly deserves.
And music in the movies. An often overlooked feature happens to be the subject of this week's final word. For that, be sure to stick around after our final break. Be back in a few.
As your incarceration expert, this is my job to prepare you. We are about to simulate a prison riot.
That was intense, right? Actually, I feel fine.
Ow!
What?
You gotta roll, Mayo. Who's Mayo?
It's my gang name. It's short for mayonnaise.
Now it's all on you, love.
Are you trying to drive me crazy?
DreamWorks Home.
Everything you did for us.
Dating him ever since. Go back inside!
For the first time in my life, I stopped thinking of myself as a child imitating an adult.
You feel that way too?
What is that, hoedown?
Hip-hop.
Voir. Ils feront toujours des photos très différentes. Ils forment leur manière de voir, chacun en fonction de son histoire.
Welcome back. Another big story that rocked Hollywood this week was the announcement that Steven Spielberg's upcoming Cold War drama, Bridge of Spies, would not feature music composed by John Williams.
This is a pretty big announcement since of the 26 feature films Spielberg has released in his career, Williams has scored 24 of them.
It's a partnership that began with Spielberg's debut film, The Sugarland Express, in 1974, and whose only exceptions have been The Color Purple and Spielberg's portion of the anthology film Twilight Zone the movie.
It's a collaboration that's brought us some of the most famous and hummable music in cinema history, including the themes to Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark,
E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Jurassic Park,
Hook, Saving Private Ryan,
The Terminal, Lincoln, and many more. But fans of the pair need not worry, since even though Thomas Newman will be taking the place of Williams for Bridge of Spies soundtrack due to, quote, a minor health issue, a DreamWorks spokesperson has confirmed that Williams will reunite with Spielberg for his next project, the family feature, The BFG.
But that got us thinking about some of the other frequent director-composer partnerships in the movies, an arrangement much more common than you might think. With two of those, this is the final word.
Slightly less well-known, but by no means less prolific, is the partnership between director Robert Zemeckis and composer Alan Silvestri. In the late 70s, Silvestri was the young protege of Steven Spielberg himself, but his first two directorial efforts weren't that popular with audiences. His first collaboration with Alan Silvestri, who at that time was writing the musical themes for B-movies and minor TV shows, was for 1984's action romance Romancing the Stone. And even though that film became a sleeper hit, Spielberg still thought that Silvestri's synth-heavy work would be ill-suited to Zemeckis' further projects. To prove him wrong, Zemeckis requested that his next soundtrack be in the full orchestral style of John Williams' Star Wars score, a request that resulted in the grand theme for Zemeckis' first blockbuster, Back to the Future. With Spielberg's doubts assuaged, Silvestri has written the music for every Robert Zemeckis film since, including Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Death Becomes Her, Contact, Back to the Futures 2 and 3, Castaway, The Polar Express, and Forrest Gump, just to name a few. And with black comedies, poignant dramas, and action flicks, and children's pictures all in that mix, the two have proved versatile and talented time and time again. The Friends' latest collaboration won't actually be appearing on screens, but on a stage in London's West End. According to Variety, they're busy working on a Back to the Future musical set to premiere later this year in honor of that film's 30th anniversary. And if their past record is any indication, it's sure to be a hit.
Another less known but not forgotten partnership between director Hayao Miyazaki and composer Joe Hisaishi. Student of legendary anime composer Takeo Watanabe, Hisaishi attended the Kuntatachi College of Music in 1969 with a major in music composition. From there, Hisaishi collaborated with various minimalist artists to further his experience in the musical world, which eventually led to small success with a few television compositions. It wasn't until 1983 when a colleague recommended him to create an image album for Miyazaki's second theatrical production, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, where Hisaishi and Miyazaki became great friends and would work together on many future projects. From his work on Nausicaa, Hisaishi moved on to compose for Castle in the Sky, My Neighbor Totoro, Kiki's Delivery Service, Porco Rosso, Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Ponyo, and strengthened his reputation as one of the budding anime industry's top musical contributors. Time and time again, Miyazaki's profound and visual artistry displayed over the years has been beautifully balanced with Hisaishi's astounding minimalist approach to orchestral arrangements in their films, and ultimately is one of the best and most substantial creative collaboration to date.
And that wraps up the show for this week. Be sure to check out our website, Facebook, and Twitter pages for news and updates on all things entertainment. I'm Connor Fack.
And I'm Ramel Tadai. We'll see you next time.
Bye.